Hello and welcome back. An undercover agent known only as Lalo infiltrated one of Mexico's most notorious drug cartels on behalf of the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. But he went well beyond the call of duty, participating in 13 executions with the knowledge of his handlers in ICE. And when a lone Drug Enforcement Administration agent tried to blow the whistle, he was silenced by ICE and by his own bosses. Fernando Lucena continues his report.
5 months after the first murder occurred, the U.S. government agencies had a very close call.
3 people were kidnapped and taken to the house of death, as it's commonly known, and tortured for information about a drug load. Apparently, one of the people provided an address. Now, the address they went to happened to be the home of a DEA agent stationed in Juarez. So they were looking for a large load of drugs, marijuana, I believe.
The DEA agent managed to avoid the criminals that came looking for him that day. With no time to lose, he gathered up his family and headed for safety across the border.
The bad guys used the municipal police to stop their car to find out who they are. And they eventually figured out that the man driving the car and one of the people that responded were, in fact, DEA agents. They were ultimately allowed to leave.
Of course, at that point in time, everything sort of fell through the floor, and that's when DEA pulled all their agents out of Cuidad Juarez because it was too close. Too close because here you have somebody at the house who's probably about to meet their maker, giving up the names of supposed undercover agents working in Cuidad Juarez. So that person obviously was either an informant or had some sort of contact with DEA to be able to give up that name.
The threat to the lives of U.S. agents caused immediate evacuation of all DEA personnel from Ciudad Juarez and prompted an investigation back in El Paso headquarters. The DEA wanted to question Lalo.
We could only ask him about certain things. We were prevented by ICE from asking him about what took place between the first murder, which occurred in, I think, August 5th of 2003, and the incident in January of 2004. So for that 5-month period, ICE and the U.S. Attorney's Office did not want us to ask him questions.
On January 15, 2004, ICE arrested Heriberto Santillan after Lalo lured him into crossing to El Paso. 2 days later, ICE finally told the Mexican authorities about the mass grave at the House of Death, and 12 bodies were found buried in the back garden. DEA agent Sandalio Gonzalez wrote a very stern letter to his ICE counterpart. This letter eventually reached Johnny Sutton. Brief extracts from the letter read: "The investigation has resulted in unnecessary loss of human life in the Republic of Mexico and endangered the lives of special agents of the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. ICE allowed at least 13 other murders to take place in Ciudad Juarez in what can only be described as a display of total disregard for human life and disrespect for the rule of law in Mexico."
The reaction from higher level officials was in DEA was very negative. The United States Attorney who received a copy of this letter, rather than contacting me to discuss the seriousness of the issues that I was raising, instead called Washington to complain about me. My direct superiors called me and instructed me not to talk to the press, not to write any more letters, and eventually they lowered my performance evaluation as a result of the letter.
Agent Gonzalez's superior, DEA Director Karen Tandy, wrote in an email that she had apologized to Texas Attorney John Sutton and that they both agreed on a no comment to the press.
I believe there's a racial connotation to the story. I think the fact that this happened along the Mexican border and the fact that the victims were all Mexicans has a lot to do with why it's been ignored I believe, and I've often said this, that if this had happened along the Canadian border and the victims had been white Canadians instead of brown Mexicans, it would have been handled differently. If, in fact, U.S. officials knew about homicides about to take place and not doing anything about them, that could be considered a criminal in nature.
This is a very, serious transgression of potentially an international problem, as well as obviously a violation of criminal law. Murder is not legal in the United States.
Due to his coverage of this sensitive subject, Bill received an unexpected visit.
2 ICE agents showed up at my house, and I wasn't there at the time, so, my wife answered the door, told me about it when I got home, and they had left a number. I tried to call them, and they never called back. And I go to work the next day, and out of the blue, these guys, burst into the office demanding to talk to me and pull me in a conference room and start, demanding that I reveal who my sources are. And I said, I'm not going to talk to you unless I can tape record it. And, they pulled out their badges and said, you know what, this is a federal investigation. And I said, I don't care.
Heriberto Santillan was indicted for murder, but then he struck a plea bargain deal with Johnny Sutton. In return for him pleading guilty to trafficking and acceptance of a 25-year sentence, the murder charges were dropped. Sandalio Gonzalez reached an out-of-court settlement in a process for retaliation against the DA and was paid $385,000. He had sued the DA due to events that, among other things, included the agency's reaction to his letter on the House of Death. In August 2004, after having retired from all informant activities, a hitman tried to shoot Lalo at an El Paso fast food restaurant.
Lalo was asked to meet with a person at the Whataburger. Lalo, feeling that perhaps it was dangerous, asked a friend to go.
He sent a buddy of his to get the money instead. He was paranoid.
Lalo was in the car with his girlfriend parked down the street from the Whataburger, and
the guy went to get the money, and some guy walked up to the car. This guy's name was Guzman. He's in the car waiting to get the money, and the guy pulls a gun out and says, Lao, that was the name of the informant.
And when the person didn't respond, the friend of Lalo's, he was shot. 4
bullets right in the guy's chest and face. He's dead. So the guy took a hit for the informant because the cartel got the wrong man.
After that incident, Lalo was taken into protective custody. ICE, the same agency that had employed Lalo, decided that his U.S. visa was irregular and began legal proceedings to deport him back to Mexico. He's now in a maximum security jail in Minnesota, fighting his former employers through the courts.
It's a sad state of affairs when your government can contract or agree with, use the services of an individual who's willing to put their life on the line every single day so that the government can get the needed evidence to prosecute more than 50 people, bring down the second in command of the largest cartel in Mexico. And then as soon as he's no longer useful because the government has blown his identity, you're like a dog. You get used until your usefulness runs out, and then you get thrown onto the street. And that's what's happened with Lalo.
Lalo is seeking to stay in the United States under the Convention Against Torture, which prohibits returning people to their home countries if they will be subjected to torture or murder with the cooperation of the government, and that there is no place in that home country in which they can be safe.
All of these binders right here, Lalo's case, this is taken from the decision in the last hearing that we have with the immigration judge, where it talks about, and the court believes that there would be Mexican law enforcement authorities who would be more than happy to put this respondent into the custody of the cartels for them to harm. The court believes that the evidence in this case is overwhelming in that regard.
I believe that under the definition of the Convention Against Torture, Lalo clearly meets this. We cannot return him to Mexico because no matter where he is in Mexico, he will be killed. There is no doubt about that.
Lalo, the informant, sitting in prison right now. The government's trying to deport him. But, we were able to get access to him at one point via email to ask him some questions. And one of the things we asked him is if he was aware of any other houses in Juarez where similar murders and tortures occurred. And he essentially said, this is a common practice used by the drug organization to enforce its rules. So yeah, there's certainly more houses.
Last February, 2 more houses were discovered in the vicinity where the original House of Death is located. Another 45 bodies were found buried in the back gardens of these houses. We had the intention of visiting the sites of these newfound houses of death, but the presence of a police patrol tailing us made us realize we had overstayed our welcome. As a consequence of the recent crackdown by the Mexican government, drug-related violence has escalated to unprecedented levels, with an average of 9 people murdered every day.
And the death toll in Mexico's drug wars continues to climb, with the Mexican army now called in to assist the police in their war with the drug cartels, a war often fought in public and on the streets. Well, that's it for this edition of People in Power. If you'd like to comment on our report or any other matter, we'd love to hear from you. Do get in touch on aljazeera.net/English. That's it for now. Until next time, bye-bye.